You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello. How are we all? I hope everyone is very, very well, and I hope you can hear me okay. Hi Richard, hi Kerry, hi Paul. Wow, you're all very keen. You're very keen. I'm very, very pleased to have you in the chat room on this rather warm July evening. Do you know what? Do you know how dedicated? Seeing as it's the bosses are in the chat room at the moment, I just want to prove how dedicated to my job I am. I've actually turned my fan off while I do this little live bit because it interferes with the microphone too much. So if I start sort of sounding like I'm about to pass out from heat stroke, it's because I've turned my fan off that was keeping me cool. But the minute I finish doing my little intro, it's going to be back on. It's going to be back on. And yes, Kerry, I'm making sure I'm very well hydrated. Thank you. Well, I hope we're all well. Hasn't it been amazing weather? I know for a lot of us in the UK, it's probably a bit too warm. A little bit too warm. But, I'm not really complaining. I even got in the paddling pool. Today. Hi, Mark! Yeah, I actually got in the paddling pool with the kids today. I was that warm, and for anyone who knows me, they know I'm not a water person. Not a water person. So for me to actually get in, and Paul's just said this is why he does his show from his freezer. That's quite a good idea. That is quite a good idea. Sort of, sit in the freezer. Just hope nobody shuts the lid on you. That could be a bit dodgy, but. Yeah, I haven't been up to much recently. I've been quite quiet, doing lots of reading and doing lots of research and writing and all that kind of thing. But it's actually my birthday this week, and apparently I'm being taken out on Saturday by the husband, and I have no idea where. He's just told me it's all day and to dress casual. So, I don't think I'm going to meet the Queen at Buckingham Palace, but who knows? But I'm sure there'll be lots of stuff to telling. Paddling pool, swimsuit. No, it would. I'd get put in Facebook jail, Mark. Nobody needs to see that. Nobody needs to see me in a swimsuit. Really, they really don't. And thank you for the birthday wishes. It's actually this Friday, if anyone wants to buy me a present. So, yes, there you go. But I have got some stuff coming up over the next sort of couple of months that I'll be able to tell you all about. So, and I know that Haunting Magazine is working on their next issue, which I'll be in again. So we'll have that to talk about as well. But I'm actually going to go straight into playing the show I recorded for you. Now, I will admit this is a pre-record. Because I'm talking to two lovely people from the States, and obviously this time of the day they're at work, so they couldn't actually make it to talk to us live, but they did make time to talk to us on it was sort of Monday night, very early Tuesday morning, and yes, I was melting. But have a listen to this interview and see what you think. Well, as promised, we're going to be talking about Octagon Hall tonight, and if I start slurring, I do apologise, but I'm recording this at 1:20 in the morning, and I finished all my Red Bull, so I might start snoring half the way through, but I'm sure I won't, because you know when you're waiting for a really interesting paranormal investigator to come along, and then two come along at the same time. I'm not only joined by the gorgeous Gina from Three Girls in the Dark, I'm also joined by the triceps from Tennessee, Mr. Chris Smith. Hi, guys.
Hello. What a great intro. Thank you.
Well, the fact you're gorgeous and the triceps
Absolutely.
from Tennessee. Well, I was thinking
if I was a wrestler, I feel like if I was a boxer or a wrestler, I'm totally going to use that if I ever go that route.
Well, the other one I was going to do is the guns from Gallatin.
Oh, that one's good.
It's way better.
Yeah.
That one's good. Yeah.
And then I was
like
thinking, I've only spoken to Chris once. If I introduce him as the triceps from Tennessee or the guns from Gallatin, he might sort of go, I'm not talking to you ever again for that. But if you like it, you're welcome to use it.
No, I'll take it.
I'm gonna use it. That's what I'm calling them from now on.
What, the guns from Gallatin?
Yep.
I love it.
So, yes, so I've got two lovely guests on my show tonight. So I've got two gorgeous American accents to sort of absorb, although we have been talking accents before we went on air, because Chris does like to make fun of our Gina's accent.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you, Chris?
Yeah.
Well,
there we go.
It's such a different... it's a very different accent from what I'm used to down here in the South, so I always give her a hard time. It's a lot of fun.
I really think, actually, Chris ruined speech for me altogether because
She didn't know about it until I came on.
Yeah. When we first met, he told me I had such an extreme accent. And I'm like, no, I don't. You do. And he's like, no, you really do. And I didn't realize it. And then when I went home, I started noticing how I was saying things. And then it became like a whole thing. And now I hear it all the time. I hear my own accent. But usually I'm surrounded by people who sound like me also. So
Yes.
I wasn't aware.
Well, I love talking to both of you. I love both of your accents. But the funniest thing I got told by an American recently was that I needed to learn to speak proper English. And,
oh, no.
Oh, yes. And I did turn around. They were being genuine. And I did turn around and say, hang on, who taught you the English language? Oh, hello.
Right.
But yeah, so I did get told by an American I had to learn to speak proper English.
We can be very stupid sometimes.
Oh, we all can, but that was a sort of I had to screenshot.
Was it a Southern American?
I don't know, actually. I didn't check where they were from, but
It sounds like something that one of us would say, because we're pretty dumb sometimes.
it just had me in stitches. I thought it was hysterical that I was being told how to speak English as an English
Sure.
person.
It's funny because we were, back in the Ghost Asylum days. I think this was even before when we did Ghostland, Tennessee. They would sit us down and interview us. And Chasey, they did subtitles for Chasey. And he, in one of his interviews, said, I speak like everybody else, the King's English. So, I mean, even he recognized the skills.
The King's English. We have a queen, mate.
Well, I mean, he's... Again, we're from the South. So.
God, you said that I'm in the future and you're in the past.
That's
70
true.
odd years in the past right now.
Don't pay any, like I said before, don't pay any attention to anything that I say. But in my defense, I was quoting Chasey, so.
Oh,
Yes.
it's priceless. I do remember that. I do remember seeing subtitles come up when I watched that. And I must admit, when I first I know I've told you the story about how I started watching Ghost Asylum, Chris. I don't know if you remember this, but you guys are responsible for me starting investigating. Because
I do remember that.
You do remember this, yeah. I was night feeding my then newborn, and I was channel hopping as you do. When you're doing, Gina, you know what I'm talking
Sure.
about. When you're doing night feeds, you're
Sure.
trying to find something to keep you amused while it's going on. And
Sure.
And I found this episode, and I saw you guys on it, and I was like, it took me a little while to actually understand you all. And then once I did, I was like, this is so much fun. And then Chasey, it took me about 3 or 4 episodes to actually get to understand Chasey, I must admit. But then I think my husband came in and he was watching it. He was going, what are they saying? And I went, it takes you a while to get your ear in, love, but once your ear's in, you're fine. And yeah, so it did make me laugh when I found the Ghostland, Tennessee. I think I found it on YouTube, and it had subtitles coming up when Chasey was talking. I was just in stitches. But then again, I find that funny when I watch an American program and they have someone with like a Scottish accent or something and they put subtitles up. I think it was when Zach Bagans did a Ghost Adventures episode over here and they had subtitles coming up for the Irish. And
Yeah.
I thought that was so funny. I really found that funny. But, But yeah, Chasey, he did take me a little while to translate. But...
Such a genuine guy. I really miss Chasey.
We miss him. We do miss him.
we understand the reasons why he left, and we support him. But man, he was a good time.
Oh, he's brilliant. I think it was the Ghostland, Tennessee one that you guys had the devil box or something in that person's house, and he was twerking in front of the camera when you went to check on it.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, and I think that caused like that big boom or whatever happened afterwards. Like he would bring some activity on because the ghosts were probably like, I like this guy. We're going to make some stuff happen for him.
Exactly. No, I do. Like I say, that's how much that's implanted on my memory, that particular scene of Chasey.
Well, you can't get it out. That's the problem. It's very much like you said. It's implanted, and sometimes, like I remember times when Chasey would answer the door in his underwear when we would be at hotels, and a lot of times we would need, him for something, and he never. And even there was this one time that I think Doogie's refrigerator didn't work or something, so he went into Chasey's room, and the lady that was trying to fix it came in there, and Chasey was in his underpants, and they were all talking, and it was very awkward. But he was just one of those guys. He didn't care.
At least he had underwear on, Chris.
At least,
yes.
Thank God.
I mean, I'd say at least he had pants on, but to you guys, pants mean trousers, so.
Yes.
Yeah, is that a thing, really?
Yeah,
so
pants.
Okay.
You call pants.
Okay.
We call pants trousers. You call them pants,
cool.
don't
Yeah.
you?
Yep.
There's quite a few language things that certain words you'd use, we'd be going in the background, and yeah. But I'm quite good at that. I had to translate when I was in St. Louis. It's fine. When I said to someone, "Do you want me to put that in the bin?" and they go, "The what?" I went, "The bin." And they went, "What's a bin?" I went, "The trash." Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I got quite good at doing that. But there was something you were saying about accents. So one of the chaps you work with... Sorry, Gina, I'm going to bring you into the interview in a minute.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
You were saying one of your production crew or something is English, Chris?
Yes, he is. I wish, and if Brandon were on the phone, he could tell you exactly where he's from, but I can't remember at the time. But his name's Andrew, and he's been with us since Ghost Asylum, and he's a really great producer, really funny guy. And I remember he met Gina and I. We took a trip, and we went to Universal Studios. We had a great time. We did some things in California with her friend Emily. And he met us there because he was working there, and he just referred to himself as a naughty dandy.
A naughty dandy.
We were talking about this earlier, yeah.
And you wanted me to explain what a dandy was.
Exactly.
Well, it's kind of a phrase from probably the 17 and 1800s, and it would relate to a bloke who was a bit of a playboy but very flamboyant, almost in a sort of, and this isn't judgmental, in the sort of the gay sort of flamboyant way, the stereotypical sort of gay thing. So everything is very flamboyant, larger than life, very bejeweled and very sort of, hi, I'm here. That's kind of what a dandy was.
And that is a very accurate description of Andrew, and it's amazing.
So he was right. He wasn't lying.
He was.
Well, I don't know if he's naughty. I can't tell you about the naughty bit.
Oh, he's naughty.
Is he naughty? Okay.
Yeah.
He's a naughty boy.
He is.
He's a naughty boy. Yes. I can. You see, it does.
I
don't know.
I cannot wait to share this show with him. It's going to be amazing.
He's going to go, "You're never allowed to speak to an English person again to explain these phrases to you."
He's going to say, "You're never allowed to talk about me again."
He loves it. He loves it.
Well, he can't go around calling himself a naughty dandy when you've got English contacts and not have that brought up. Because we've taught you something else tonight already as well, haven't we, Chris?
What's that?
We taught you a fact you didn't know. And not about poop.
Yes.
And not about poop. We were actually having a conversation about poop when I made a comment about my book,
That was
number
my
2.
fault. That was my fault.
Gina and I having an intelligent conversation about books and writing, and Chris is chortling in the background because I said number 2 is 2/3 done. And this is the guy that gets the television contract, and we're the ones sitting on the out. No, we taught Chris a fact that he didn't know, didn't we, Chris?
About the forest.
Oh, we did, and I'm actually very excited about this. Yeah.
Are you going to tell us what the fact was? See if you remember.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm most ashamed of, that Nottingham is a real place. But not only that, but Sherwood Forest is a real place from Robin Hood. And I had no idea. I thought this was all fiction.
Oh, no. It's very, very real, and I know people who live there. So, yeah. Well, we can when you guys get to come over, we'll take you to Sherwood Forest. There's loads of places we can take you, though. We'll just have you on the road.
I would love it.
Yeah.
I'll
do the history bit and sort of, and make poop jokes if that's what keeps you amused.
Oh, I've got.
It will keep me amused. 100%. Yes.
I will tell you this: we'll have to come in like the fall or the spring because I can't deal with no AC. That's like we've been spoiled over here. I can't believe you guys.
Well, we call the fall autumn. That's what we call it here, autumn.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, we use that word sometimes.
Yeah, we don't call it fall. We don't call it fall. Again, I'm translating. Yes, you can come in the autumn. I think, October's a pretty good, nice time to come. Autumn. You're just going to take the mick out of my accent now, aren't you, Chris?
I mean, I've been known to go English every now and then. Well, it's Andrew.
Sorry.
It's Andrew. It's Andrew. Actually, what's hilarious, the funniest part about Andrew, my brother is very enthralled with, overseas and Europe, and he really wants to, we all want to come over there and investigate some of the amazing places that you have, but Brandon's very interested in this, so he's always picking Andrew's brain and trying to, learn the slang and all the different things that you guys say and do over there. So, and then he'll bring it up like months later to Andrew, and he'll say something and it won't be correct, and Andrew will just look at him like, what are you talking about? So,
well, tell Brandon if he wants some proper lessons, and I'm not a naughty dandy, but I'm quite well educated, he can just drop me a line and I'll help him as much as I can.
Oh, he'd love it. Plus, we found out we did the ancestry thing, the DNA thing, and we're somewhere in like the 80 percentile of Wales, I think. And then we've got we got a little Irish in us, so we're like all European. There's like nothing else. So
there you go. There you go.
There you go.
Well, you haven't said ma'am yet, Chris, by the way. We're 13 minutes in and you haven't said it yet.
Sorry about that, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, so tonight we are talking about... I've got to keep serious now. God, I know what's going to happen when this is playing out on Wednesday. The boss of the station, Kerry, is going to be writing messages to me going, Penny, you behave during these shows. Yeah. Nah.
Never put Chris and Gina on the show together again.
Oh no, I'm definitely having you guys back on. I'm enjoying myself, even if it is 20 to 2 in the morning. Right, so Octagon Hall. I'd never heard of this place. Gina, you suggested it to him. Now, I presume both of you have investigated it, because I know it's kind of in the middle of sort of Tennessee and Missouri, isn't it, really? Almost.
It's Kentucky.
Yep, it's in the very southern part of Kentucky.
Right, so it's Kentucky, because when I was looking at the map, I sort of noticed that sort of Missouri was kind of to the northwestish, and then Tennessee was kind of to the southeastish of it. Would that be about right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
I didn't. I wasn't sure if you were aware of it or had seen it yet, and I thought it was a really interesting place, and I had a pretty interesting experience there, which we can get to later. So I wanted you to check it out.
Oh, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed looking up. I don't get to do much on the American Civil Wars, really, so it's quite a learning curve for me. I know when I did a show on Gettysburg, about 18 months ago, and we'd always thought that the whole Confederate, the way we were taught in the UK is that the whole Confederate Unionist thing was the Confederates because they were pro-slavery and the Unionists were anti-slavery, and that's what kicked it all off. But it wasn't, was it? It was to do with taxes and the way the Confederate states were treated differently to the Union states.
Yeah, it was multiple things. Yes.
Yeah. So we always thought it was like, you've got to support the Unionists because the Confederates are bad. Confederates believe in slavery. Slavery is bad, therefore. And it was interesting learning more about it when I did a show on Gettysburg. That it's not quite as simple as that, which I found really fascinating. Now, one of the most fascinating facts I found when I started looking into this is that Kentucky itself wanted to be a neutral state when the Civil War started.
Which is surprising, yeah.
Yeah, which I found quite interesting, but unfortunately it didn't last that way for very long, because I think in a nutshell, the Unionists knew if they got through Kentucky they could get to Tennessee, and the Confederates knew if they protected Kentucky the Unionists couldn't get through to Tennessee. So it was kind of, it was used as a bit of a buffer state and quite quickly became involved. But the chap who built Octagon Hall, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Andrew Jackson Caldwell, was actually a pro-Confederate, and I think even his brother was a general in the Confederate Army.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he was a slaveholder.
Yes. Yeah. But that I mean, as bad, with modern hindsight, we know that's bad and it's wrong. But then it was considered normal, wasn't it?
That was the norm for back then, yeah.
Yeah, especially in the South. I think his brother was even a colonel in the rebel army. So he was predominantly pro-Confederacy.
Yeah. Yeah, I did read that his brother was Confederate. And I also read that they used slaves to build the house.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I'm almost sure of it, yeah.
Yeah. And I believe by 1865, the slave ownership records show that Caldwell owned, I hate saying this, but it's history, it's not always palatable, he owned 25 slaves who would work on his plantation and all of that kind of thing.
I didn't know it was that many, but yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that in the slave, I think, what do you call them? There's like slave ownership records that he had 25 slaves, which, like I say, with modern hindsight, we look at and we're a bit sort of like, ooh, can't imagine it.
Yeah.
But again,
it's ugly, but it was real.
Yeah, yeah. What was Missouri as a state? Was it Confederate or was it Unionist or was it a bit of both?
I mean, living here, I think it's a little bit of both, but it was Union.
Right. And Tennessee, I would have said, was a Confederate state.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So we've got the Civil War going on. The house has been built. I think they started building it in 1847, but it took about 10 or 12 years to complete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And quite soon, and it's part of the whole, I love this word, antebellum era. I love that word, antebellum. Excuse me. And quite soon after it had been finished, the Civil War broke out. And it was right in the sort of the path of two of the big forts that were overthrown, Henry and Donelson, which were being used to defend the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers.
Yep.
Right.
So I have done my research here. And,
you have.
Yeah. And what was interesting...
You're way more prepared than I am, Penny, because I've...
Oh, thanks, Chris.
I've been here several times, but they all start running together after a little while. I do know that there was a lot of Confederate troops that camped out during that time through there. I think it was somewhere like 18,000 or something.
Yeah,
about that.
Yeah, there was like 1,000 all at once that were camped out in the grounds around the building.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was coming to next. Yeah, but no, you're right. You are right. And say, Chris, all right, if you get lost, Chris, just make poop jokes or say "ma'am," and we're fine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Because I have a lot of poop jokes. I'm pretty sure I can come up with. And ma'am is just like that comes natural. So
that's fine.
You continue on though. I'll just make add-ons.
Yeah, just go yes, ma'am every so often. Gina and I'll have the conversation. Ma'am. You just go yes, ma'am every so often.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'ams. Plural.
Anyway, it's not just you that gets me when they do that. It's any bloke with an American accent when he says yes, ma'am. It's just we don't get it over here. It's like, what do you want, woman? Anyway, so they reckon there was an estimated around 8,000 to 10,000 Confederate soldiers actually camped out and being looked after in the grounds of Octagon Hall when they were fleeing the two forts. And these two forts, one of them is actually now underwater anyway. I think you can't actually see it. But they weren't actually designed to fight off Unionist troops. They were actually just designed to protect the river. and because they were attacked both from the river and from the land, good old Ulysses Grant, they couldn't cope, and that's why they bailed, and they started basically running towards, I believe they were running towards Tennessee, if I remember rightly. But they do believe there was around 8,000 to 10,000 Confederate soldiers camped out and being cared for at Octagon Hall. Yeah. But the interesting thing, the other thing I read is that the Unionist soldiers knew that they'd be in trouble if they tried to take these thousands of Confederate soldiers, so they delayed their attack on them by a couple of days, hoping that they'd move on so they didn't have to actually fight them. Right. Seems quite sensible. It seems quite sensible to me.
Sure.
Now, what they did do, though, the Unionists, when they got to Octagon Hall, because they knew it was Confederate sympathisers, and Caldwell's meant to have actually said, you know, haha, you missed my brother by 2 days, nice try. They killed all the cattle and all the livestock.
I didn't know that. Sad.
That's all right. That's all right. It's part of my job to tell you, help you with this stuff. Same as
sad,
Sherwood Forest is a real place. But they threw cattle down. That's going to be my next tagline, isn't it? Sherwood Forest is a real place. They threw cattle down the farm's wells to pollute the water supply, so that the family couldn't access the water and had to travel to access water. So it was quite sort of, and what they do say is there's no reports of what they did to the women and children at the hall.
Yep.
Then again, it's war.
I remember this now.
Oh, you remember it now, do you? Okay.
I remember the pollution of the well. I do remember that now.
Yeah. Yeah, they killed the cattle and threw them down the well. So just those kind of, like that kind of aggression and everything else, I can imagine would cause quite a lot of things to be a bit pissed off, shall we say, and still be loitering around.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I just remember, for me, the thing that I remember the most is like more of the paranormal claims, like Elizabeth, who was the Caldwell's daughter. She was engulfed in flames. She was playing too close to the fireplace.
Mary.
And,
Mary.
Exactly.
Elizabeth was her mum.
Okay, never mind. Anyway.
Sorry, but you got the right. You're in the ballpark. You're in the ballpark.
But I remember she died,
yes.
Was it days later, I believe, from the burns that she received from that fireplace. And there's a lot of people that have experienced her spirit down there in the winter kitchen. So I remember that being the thing that I remember the most about Octagon Hall.
Yeah, I was gonna come on to Mary, because she is one of the ones that I've actually seen a lot of facts about her misreported when I was double checking birth records and all that, but that's just me being a bit sort of OCD about checking stuff. But yes, her mum was Elizabeth. That was Andrew's first wife. Elizabeth died in 1851, so before they even moved, before the house was even finished, he then married someone called Harriet, who outlived him. But Mary, her name was, she was Mary Elizabeth Caldwell. She died in the September of 1854. Well, you're right, she was playing in the kitchen by the fire, got engulfed in flames and died from her injuries, and she was 7 years old.
Yeah,
according to her gravestone, because she's buried in, there's a plot there apparently, a family burial plot, and she's actually buried there with her dad. So we'll get on to Mary then. You're saying that people have encountered Mary?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the first time I ever went to Octagon Hall, me and one other guy went, and this was years ago. This is way before television, and I remember immediately the first thing that I noticed about Octagon Hall was all the mannequins. They have mannequins of Confederate soldiers and all types of things all over the place, so you got to really watch out for that, because it'll scare the hell out of you. But I remember one of the EVPs that this other gentleman caught when he was down in the winter kitchen was of Mary, and I can't remember exactly what it said. It was definitely a child, and he definitely felt like he was communicating with her. And I know there's one portion down there in the winter kitchen where you can open a door. I don't know if it's a closet or a pantry, but there's almost like a little dugout path through there. And when we opened that door, that seemed to be when we started getting most of the EVPs of children, or what sounded like a child.
Right.
So yeah,
Are you talking about the tunnels underneath the pantry?
Yep.
Yeah, so in the winter kitchen in the basement, there's a pantry, and when you open up the bottom of it, it goes into a tunnel that actually ran underground to the back of the fields to where the train tracks come up. Mm-hmm. And the tunnel is, it's like fallen in now, but that's where they would send the Confederates to get out of the house, and they would jump on the train and leave.
Mm. But the guarantee is the kids would have played in it as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Know what children are like if they find
for sure.
Somewhere fun to play. They would have been playing in it as well, yeah. Did you ever encounter Mary when you've been there, Gina?
I don't know who I encountered, but I will tell you my experience there, because it's in one of my top experiences that I've had.
Oh, wow.
So one night we were doing, not our investigation, but we were doing a tour group, and Chris and Mike were in the basement, and they had, I guess we had probably like 6 or 7 people in our tour group. And what would happen is that they would go from different spot to different spot on the property and investigate different areas of the home. So we were all in the basement, and in the basement, one side is the winter kitchen and one side is like where they would store stuff, I guess. And we had 2 girls that are regulars that show up to the tours, kind of move away from the group and go over towards the winter kitchen. So I walked over there to kind of get them back to the group and get them to do a group session, because we didn't want any contamination. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking up on them, and their faces are like like they just saw a ghost, right? And so as I'm walking up, I'm hearing someone hum or someone sing. And I really thought that I was going to find someone in the kitchen with them. I thought it was going to be a third person or a third girl with them. It sounded so real that I didn't even question that it was paranormal. I legitimately thought that it was just another human being. Mm-hmm. So I walked past them, and I turned the corner to walk into the kitchen to get the other person who was humming or singing, and nobody was in there. And I turned around and looked at them, and the reason their faces were like that, because they were hearing it also. And I looked at them, I said, "Do you hear that?" And they just nodded yes.
Wow.
And I'm like, nobody's in there. And they're like, "We know." So the reason that they had kind of trailed off from the group is because they heard it first. So all 3 of us heard it, and we kind of just stopped in our tracks, because when I turned that corner, I definitely expected to see a woman in there humming or singing. I thought they were maybe doing it as like a trigger object to get some sort of EVP interaction. They were recreating them humming or singing, because the winter kitchen actually has a trail that goes outside to the summer kitchen, which is it called the Whistling Trail? Chris, do you remember what they call that? There's like...
no, it is. I do believe it is called the Whistling Trail.
So the slaves would whistle from the summer kitchen to the basement. So I think it was because I was told 2 reasons. 1, so they knew that they were coming, and 2, if they were whistling, they weren't eating their food, so they wanted them to whistle. So they would whistle from the summer kitchen down this path into the basement of the winter kitchen. So I thought maybe they were using that as a trigger object for their EVP session. But sure enough, when I turned to walk into the winter kitchen, nobody was there. And I heard the whistling and humming with my own ears. And like I said, I expected a human being to be in there. When I turned and saw no one, I was like, whoa, And then I turned and looked at the girls, and they're freaked out. And I said, "Hey, that's what you came for, right?"
Well, yeah. Yeah, you've just had quite an amazing experience that a lot of us would strive for. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and like I said, it was so realistic that I didn't question it being paranormal. Like, I wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, what is that? What's in there? Are we recording?" I really went in there to grab the third person, and nobody was there.
Cool. Do you know what I'm getting images of actually right now as you're talking? Is of a woman sitting by a fire, rocking a baby, like humming to them.
Oh, interesting.
That's the image I'm getting in my head as you're talking.
Yeah, there's definitely a large fireplace in the winter kitchen down there.
Yeah. But that's the kind of image I'm getting of it. It's of a woman sort of nursing a baby and like humming to them as they like rock them. And
right.
I know that whilst Elizabeth, Andrew's first wife, did pass away before the house was finished, Harriet's meant to have had quite a few children with him. So there would have been a lot of children in the building. But the image I'm getting is of a woman sort of comforting a child, like nursing a child,
right,
rocking in a chair, humming to them. But that's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, and who was humming, I don't know. So maybe it was her, maybe not. But it was definitely one of the more interesting experiences I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I also read about the place is there are quite a few hidey holes where they could hide the soldiers. There's this bit under the front steps, I believe, that there's a brick that you could take out and then you'd put in from sort of once you'd climbed into the hole. But the other thing was that they used to he used to put them up in, I don't know how you pronounce it, cupola, where he had loads of bees, and he would hide the Confederates up there in like bee suits, so the bees would swarm all over them, and then the Unionists wouldn't go up there to look for them because they'd get stung by bees.
It's very smart.
Yeah, that's very smart. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Okay, well, this area got hit by lightning. I think it was. I've had two reports. One said 1916, one said 1918, but it ended up being pulled down because of that. But there was also in 1911 a boot found with a bone in it, and that they believe was that of a wounded Confederate soldier who'd gone up there to hide because he'd been shot in the foot.
Yeah, I believe, well, I know for sure that they found one Confederate soldier that they had hid, that he died from his wounds. They hid him in there because the Union Army was in there looking for Confederate soldiers. I can't remember. It seems like that's very familiar. And like I said, forgive me, everybody, for listening to this. It's like this guy is so dumb. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. But honestly, I mean, we
dumb
go to
but
a new
pretty.
place.
He's dumb but pretty. It's fine.
That's very debatable, but thank you. But honestly, we go to so many places every week that sometimes these stories run together. But I do remember that they did find bones of a Confederate soldier.
Yeah.
And I do remember Brandon, and this is a testament to this place, because Brandon, if he sees something or experiences something, you know that it happened. You know, he doesn't embellish.
He doesn't speak up. Yeah, he doesn't say it unless something really, really did happen.
Yeah, and he saw with his own eyes. He tells this all the time when we're doing Q&As. You know, what's one of the scariest things that ever happened? In Octagon Hall, he saw a chair move by itself, and this was during the daytime when he was doing his daytime sweep with all his gadgets and things that he carries around. So, I mean, I think there really is something going on there. I mean, obviously, with all the Civil War, the South is so saturated, I believe, with hauntings that are associated with the Civil War. But especially this place, you got to think about how many people were around this area in that house camping out, and just all the other things that we don't even know about. I mean, history is an untold story that only so many things can be documented. I mean, you don't know what some of the slaves may have went through. How many slaves may have died there. I know that they've documented at least 2 soldiers buried on the property, and I'm sure there's probably more. So, I think, plus, this was an 8-sided house. That's also a very unique place to have built back in the day. And I think it was made for a defensive kind of thing. I know it took them over 10 years to make it, but I think they made it for that purpose so that they could maybe defend the house a little bit better.
Interesting. Almost like a fort.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So we know that it was sold in 1918 to a chap actually from Nashville who was an osteopath. It was the early days of osteopathy, and he was him and then his wife were basically there until it got sold off and started being rented out as a sort of just normal rental property. But I don't think there's too much that from him that seems to be in the history books. I mean, I did actually start looking into the history of osteopathy because I thought it was quite interesting, because I wondered when it actually started, because I am that much of a nerd. And it was the late 1800s, if anyone's interested. In 1892, thank you. No poop jokes. In 1892, there were 22 students of osteopathy. I found that when you think about how many osteopaths there are now. There you go.
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I am just that much of a nerd. I find things. I go, I wonder when this actually started, and then I have to look it up because I can't sleep unless I look it up. But anyway, so it was an osteopath but from Nashville, which is applicable to you, Chris. Obviously, Nashville.
Makes sense.
Yes. So he went there in 1918, but I do think that the bulk of the energy from the stories I've read and from the haunting sort of stories I've read and from the experiences you guys have told me so far is down to the Civil War era. And as you say, Chris, a lot of the South is so sort of immersed in Civil War history that it's not surprising that hauntings can be attributed to it.
There's so many sites. There's so many sites down here in Dixie. I mean, we've not even begun to scratch the surface. You could do a whole, I'm sure, 20 episode season for probably 20 seasons on just the Civil War sites in the South. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's an eye opener for me actually starting to learn about it, because it's not something we really get taught over here about the American Civil War. So it is we don't even get taught that much about the War of Independence, to be quite honest. I studied the Wild West. I did study the Wild West when I was at school, but it's definitely a learning experience. So we know that a few soldiers are buried on the property. There's probably more than that would have died there, because as with most sort of nice houses in the area, it became a hospital. People were injured people were being cared for. When you were guys,
if you would have had a home, especially of that size in the South during the Civil War, almost every single home was at one point in time a makeshift hospital. Just because, you got to think, this was out in the trenches. They didn't have anywhere to go. A lot of people would take in both sides. North, south, whatever. These people would just treat the wounded because it was just everywhere. It was right in their backyard. So there's really no way to get around it.
Yeah. But funnily enough, the UK was like that in World War One. All right, it's a bit further on. A lot of our sort of stately homes and big houses were used as makeshift. They call them VAD hospitals, voluntary aid dispatching, I think it stands for. But a lot of them were used as well for that reason, because there were just so many wounded coming back across the Channel from France that there was nowhere for them to go. The military hospitals were full to capacity, so a lot of them, it's in effect like the Red Cross, were setting up hospital wards for say 50, 100 beds in a lot of the sort of the bigger houses and stately homes in the area, and it was kind of seen as a war effort, because where else were these predominantly men going to go if there was no room in a conventional military hospital? And as one of the things I learned about the Civil War, which I found fascinating, was that it wasn't like done in a big field. Like you can imagine the battles of old. It was quite guerrilla warfare, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was a bit scattered too.
Oh, yeah. And, can you imagine the farms and the people, they're just going about their day, they're going about their daily lives and their routines, and then all of a sudden you've got a battle going on your property, and you have all these men, sometimes thousands of soldiers from both sides, and they're wailing, they're screaming, some of them are dying, they've lost limbs. And, you're just, what are you going to do? You just have to sit there and you have to help them, and you take it, and you try to do the best you can. But it's got to be traumatizing. Some of these families already had problems of their own. And then not only that, whether it be financial or, sickness, because there was a lot of sickness back in those days. But now they have thousands of soldiers to care for and listen to. And, I'm sure a lot of the homes were basically taken over. So, it was just I can't imagine living back in those days at all.
And to add to it, some of these families quite literally got hit in the crossfire. Some of these families ended up dying because of they would be caught in the middle of battle.
Mm.
Yep.
Well, isn't there the story about, wasn't it in Gettysburg, that woman got shot?
Yep.
She was making bread or
Through
something.
the door.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And got caught, literally caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
So it's quite, that was one of the things I really remembered from sort of starting to research about it. It wasn't the kind of battle that I would envisage, like in a big field and two sides charging at each other. It was done in the streets. It was kind of almost, you'd encounter someone, you'd start fighting them. And the other thing that I found interesting was it was brother against brother. You found, with the Caldwells, they were Confederates, but that wasn't always the case, was it? You could have two brothers, so it could be you and Brannon, for example, Chris. One of you could be a Confederate and the other one be a Unionist, and you'd end up fighting each other.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd have let him kill me.
Would you? Oh.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh. Does he know this? Does he know that you'd let him kill you if he was on the opposite side?
No, I mean, I wouldn't tell him. I would never tell him. But...
Just make him think he won. Okay, I get you.
Exactly.
So what sort of feel does Octagon Hall have as a place? Does it feel warm, or does it feel a bit scary, or?
For me, I think when I walk into Octagon Hall, it doesn't feel like something that's like immediately provoking. It doesn't seem like things are like, get out, immediately when you walk in. I think it's an old place, and I know there have been at least probably 100 different paranormal teams that have went in there, probably a lot more than that, that have investigated this place. So they're probably used to that type of interaction by the time I got there, especially by the time we filmed there, Haunted Live. But what I get is, it's a very, it's kind of very touchy in the way that we like to investigate. We never provoke, no matter what the situation. We always try to be respectful, and we try to get on their level and communicate with them in a way that they would maybe respond. It's kind of sad, but I think it's very, at first, kind of standoffish. You walk in, you don't really immediately feel things, but if you hit the right nerve, I think you can get the right answers that you need. That's just my opinion.
What about you, G?
I would agree to that. I think there's kind of a creepy feeling to it, not because of the building itself, but it's a museum now, and it houses war artifacts and Native American ones too. And there's even a death mask of someone in there. And then it has these mannequins, and these sort of like the mannequins that are like reenacting that time period. So that definitely adds to like the creep value of the place. But I don't ever feel scared when I'm in there. But like I said earlier, I mean, I had an amazing experience there. So I believe something's happening, something's going on. So, yeah, it's kind of it's kind of creepy, but not. I don't feel like anything is like demonic or anything like that going on.
No. I feel it's much more like empathy is what I feel.
Yeah.
When I walk in there, it's nothing that's gonna scare you out of there. I mean, I've been to places before where I get exactly that. I mean, even close to that area.
Well, didn't you say there was one that, I think you investigated it for Haunted Live, and you wouldn't tell me what it was called, but you said there was a place near you, Chris, that scares you.
Oh, yeah, I can tell you now. It was Craig Font Mansion.
Right.
That, to me, is probably the scariest place I've ever investigated. And what's so crazy about it is I'm not a feel kind of guy. I'm not like Doogie. I don't have any, special, I don't know if you want to call them powers or sensitivities. I'm very far from a psychic medium. I'm not even a psychic large. What I got out of that place was just extreme fear and just, I was terrified. And there wasn't really anything other than the feeling of that place. And I know it was a place that, a lot of violence happened there between the Native Americans and the people who owned the property or who bought the property, or actually who were, given the property after the war. So a lot of conflict, a lot of things. But I grew up on stories of that place my whole life. People who had been there, even maintenance workers who had axes thrown at them. And the guy that the caretaker, who's an old state trooper, he would go on and on about how the devil lived there. And, you know, he was very against us investigating there and filming there. And even the night that we filmed Haunted Live there, he had a heart attack and had to go to the hospital. I mean, this place is just one of those very foreboding. It's a very different feeling than what I'm used to. I'm not used to being, I'm not used to feeling vulnerable, and I'm not used to feeling that type of feeling. So when I go into a place like that, which there's only that one for me, there's a couple places that feel, you know, similar, but nothing that strong. So yeah, that place for me is, I'll go back just because I'm dumb. No, you know, I'll keep going back every time, but I'm very trepidatious about it. I'm very, very leery of that place.
Yeah. And that's near you, though. That's near Nashville, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's actually closer to Gallatin. It's only about 20 minutes up the road in Castellian Springs, Tennessee.
So how far is Nashville from Gallatin, then?
It's about 30 some odd miles, I'd say.
Oh,
so
right,
it takes about a good 45 minutes to get here with no traffic.
Okay.
When I used to work up there, more like an hour.
Okay.
During rush
So it's
hour.
about the same where I am to London. Then I'm trying to put things in like my head, work things out. So you're about the same as I would be to. So Gallatin is like where I live in Essex compared to London. London being Nashville. I know what it's early in the morning. I'm gabbling now. I do apologise. But the point I was trying to make about saying about the houses is that even though the two of them have got similarities in their histories, i.e. the Civil War side of things and everything else, they've got very, very different feel to them.
Yes.
And from what you're
Absolutely.
saying about Octagon Hall, it has still got the sort of caring family feel to it, even though people have died there. Whereas this other one that you were mentioning, Cragfont, did you say it was called Cragfont? That hasn't. That's got a much more menacing kind of antagonistic feel to it, which is what's amazing about what we do as a hobby and, or in some cases, a job. It's how two properties that can have not that dissimilar pasts can have such different vibes to them.
Sure.
Which is what's fascinating. So, with Octagon, have you ever done investigations in the grounds where obviously the camps would have been and everything else?
I think your brother did.
Yeah,
He was out there in the field.
Yeah. Personally, I haven't, but I know they have the cemetery. I think they even have another structure out there behind the home. I think it's more like the slave quarters, but I think it's been condemned just because it's kind of dangerous to walk out in there right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people have had experiences all over the grounds as well. I think Brandon took a few groups out there when Gina and I investigated together.
Yep.
And
I remember his group coming back being. I don't remember what the story is, unfortunately, but I remember his group coming back from the fields and where the family's buried, being excited about something they saw out there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go all the way back there that night, but the other group was pretty excited about being out there.
I'll tell you what would be cool to do, though, is to get a digital recorder and put it into that tunnel that you talked about that goes from the kitchen. So I doubt people could get in there, but like put one in on a pole or a string so you can push it into the tunnel and then just let it record and see what comes out of it. That would be quite an interesting one to do.
Oh, for sure. Because like the acoustics of tunnels, like I know Gina and I have spent some time watching YouTube videos of haunted caves and tunnels and different structures, but I know a lot of things that I've watched of evidence when it comes to, you know, mines, caves, tunnels. I mean, I think that absolutely that echo and the sound reverberation bouncing off the walls, for some reason, I think it still carries over in the afterlife or whenever you're trying to gather evidence, because you hear so many EVPs when you go into these tunnels. So I think, you know, normally when you're down there and you're saying something very low, you know, you'll hear it on the other side because of that, you know, just the acoustics. And I think that still happens, you know, today with EVPs when people are investigating these types of things. So I think that would be a great idea if anybody's brave enough to go down in there. I think we should send Mike down in there from, you know, that's just my opinion.
Well, do me a favour. Next time you guys go there, to do that for me and let me know what happens. See if anything comes up. But literally just put one down there and leave it. Don't go down there. Just literally put it down there and kind of let it run while you're doing other stuff in the rest of the house to see if it picks up anything.
Leave it.
Leave it.
Yep.
We'll just leave it.
And that's in the same room that I heard the humming, where the tunnel opens up.
Yep.
At.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of doing that with recorders, just leaving them somewhere and then going off and doing something else and seeing what I come back to.
Sure.
It's quite an interesting sort of...
Oh, yeah. Like, I was listening to Coast Radio. This was years ago when I was still, contemplating getting into the paranormal myself. I used to listen to all the radio shows. And there was this one team, and they went into this old psychiatric hospital, and they left a recorder running in a room. And they literally caught what they think was like a murder of someone drowning someone else. And you could totally hear... I mean, that's exactly what it sounded like. And they claimed that they just left it in an empty room and nobody was in there. But I mean, obviously there's been tons of other instances where people have caught things in just a room by itself with nothing going on. So yeah, I mean, if you got the time to go through the evidence and listen to it, yeah.
See, that is the boring bit of it all, listening to the hours of recordings you get. That's why when people say, have you listened to the recordings from such and such an investigation yet? No, I haven't had time. I don't want to do it.
That's why those DR60 Panasonic recorders are so coveted after these days. That's why you can't find one for under $2 or $3 grand, because it cuts out the middleman. Cuts out all that, nothingness. Because we've gotten lazy as paranormal investigators. Your what is that you have? The ReVP? That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's like a burst, and you can listen back right away. Yeah, the ReVP Paranologies makes this piece of equipment. It's kind of large and bulky, but it really is a really good piece of equipment, especially if you just want to do burst sessions and you're in the dark, because it's got like 4 buttons on it, and it's very easy to use, and I've captured so many things with it. I mean, that thing's really a pretty good piece of equipment. And over the years, after doing this for over 10 years now, that's kind of my go-to when it comes to audio, just because I've spent so many hours of my life listening. I remember I used to work in marketing and graphic design, and I can remember so many days of work just listening to audio while I was working, and trying to shush all my coworkers. It's like, bro, you're talking a little loud over there. I'm trying to hear some activity. And so, like, I mean, it can be very tedious, this thing we call paranormal investigation.
Yeah, it can. I've got about 5 hours worth of digital recordings to listen to from the last few investigations I've done, and I'm kind of putting them off. But
Brandon, I'll tell you this. Here's Brandon. Brandon loves to collect evidence like that. He will leave things everywhere we've gone. Just think about this. We have investigated so many places over the past 5-6 years. Brandon has probably only gone over about 3 of those years. He has so much stuff. He has terabyte upon terabyte upon terabyte of video and sound that he's never even gone over. He could have the holy grail of evidence, but we'll just talk to him and we're just like, so, all this stuff that you've been collecting, that he makes us stay late after the event's over so he can collect. Have you gone over any of this? He's like, one day I will. I'm just like, well.
He will. I'm sure he will, and he'll find something really exciting that happened 8 years ago and want to talk about it. But, so, Octagon Hall, it's a thumbs up as a place to investigate and visit if you're in Kentucky?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, your favourite experience is the humming?
Yep.
Gina? Chris, what was your favourite experience from Octagon Hall?
Actually, probably listening to the EVP that one guy caught the very first time that we went out there. This guy was I'm not going to say who he was, but he was a very hardcore paranormal investigator. And this was, I mean, we were TWC at the time, but I was off work that day, and this guy invited me, and he was kind of well known in the area. And he's like, hey, I have the place for the day. Would you like to come investigate? And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. He told me not to wear a shirt that said Paranormal Investigator on it. He said, if you have any logos, don't wear it, because he wanted to try and, fool the ghosts into thinking that we're just kind of hanging out doing our thing, which is kind of an interesting approach. I'm not bashing it. But, just listening to that little girl talk, or little boy, or, whoever it was definitely a child. I think Octagon Hall definitely has a feeling to it. I think it's definitely, I think it has things that it would like to communicate and relate to us if we'll just listen and get our hearts and our minds in the right place. And I think that's kind of the problem with a lot of investigators today. A lot of people have this misconception that you have to provoke and you have to push, and, to try to elicit a response. And a lot of times, if you just go into a room and you just sit and you listen and you're quiet, sometimes they'll come to you. If and then you gain their trust, and then you can almost have a conversation. I think Octagon Hall is one of those places where it's used to being investigated. It's used to people asking them the same old question over and over. But if you have the right tactic and the right frame of mind, I think you can, collect some really amazing evidence.
No, you're preaching to the converted there. You're preaching to the converted. It's one of my favourite things to do is just sit in a room and just listen. And you just never know what's going to come up. Is the manners, being polite, that kind of thing. It tends to, I find it produces more than being nasty. But there you go.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that my birthday, ma'am? Is that what that is, Chris? It's my birthday.
No,
ma'am.
I'm gonna save that for your birthday.
Oh, thank you. Well, guys, that's nearly an hour we've been chatting for, and I'm still awake. I'm very proud of myself right now. Thank you very much for being my guest. What have you got coming up anyway, Gina? What have you got coming up investigation wise?
I actually have a private case in August, but after that I have some Paracons that I'll be at. I'm trying to make it out to Michigan Paracon. We do Scarefest every year, so I'll be there. And then in October, I have my Paranormal 101 class at Ashmore Estates, which I believe only has 2 tickets left. So, yeah, and it's not till October, so it's almost sold out. Brilliant. Which will be on my page if you want to go check that out. And then, of course, we have our Halloween party, Penny, that I invite you to every year.
I know.
And it's already started planning. We're expecting 400 people this year. So
I will get there one year, I promise.
And
I promise.
I've been trying to get to this Halloween party for 3 years, and I think I'm actually going to get to go this year. So I think this is the year that you're going to want to come, Penny.
Yeah.
You sweet talk my husband to let me come out to Missouri for a Halloween party, and you're on. But yeah, there's only so many times I can leave him with the kids.
Well, we've discussed that you guys don't do Halloween like we do Halloween.
No, we don't.
So you haven't had the full experience yet.
No.
Oh my God, Penny, no. You got to get out here to the States. Halloween is it's way bigger of a deal than Christmas.
To some of us.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Well, to me it is. I love Christmas. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but
stop doing this to me, guys. Halloween. I would come out in a heartbeat if I could. In a heartbeat. But
heartbeat.
A heartbeat. God, that made me sound really sort of London then. Yes, in a heartbeat. So what have you got going on at the moment, Mr. Smith?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've had the past 2 or 3 weeks off, so I've had a really nice time off. I got to kind of hang out, eat a lot of pizza, and drink a lot of questionable things. But this coming weekend, we're going to the Exchange Hotel in Gordonsville, Virginia. And then we are booked solid all the way through August. We've got a couple of events in September. I'm definitely not going to go into where all we're going, but if anybody wants to know, they can go to TennesseeWraithChasers.com, click the event link, or you can go to our Facebook page. We got a similar link there. We're usually all over the country every weekend. That's what I do, and I love doing it.
And you love doing it. And how is Haunted Towns doing, the new series? Because we don't know when we're getting it over here. I have contacted people to try and find out, and nobody seems to know.
I don't know. I
All
don't
right,
know.
how's it doing on your side of the pond? How's it looking?
I know it's doing really well on our side of the pond. I know that we're getting very good responses from the fans. I know the ratings are good. But I don't know when they're going to start it. Did they ever air the first Haunted Towns over there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wish I knew, but honestly, they don't tell me anything. Literally, when we did Haunted Live, we knew literally 2 weeks before we started filming that we were doing it. So they kind of keep us in the dark about that kind of thing.
Is it? I've tried contacting the TV company. They don't come back to me. I've got Paul from Haunted Magazine on the case now, because if he can't find out, nobody will find out.
Oh, so, I work for them and I can't find out. So
they've got to tell us, because there's quite a few people over here that want to see it as well. So, but yeah, we had the first series and Ghost Asylums on constant loop being played as well. So,
I'm so sorry.
It kept me company doing night feeds, Chris. Don't apologise. Don't apologise. But, guys, well, thank you so... Will you two come back on my show again next year?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you ever so much, guys, for being my lovely guests on my birthday week show. And I must say, happy birthday to you in a few days as well, Gina.
Yes, and happy birthday to you, and thank you for staying up so we could be on.
Oh, yes. It's honestly, you've had me in stitches. I've really enjoyed it. But I will be holding you both to coming back on next year when I start booking the 2020 schedule.
Absolutely, yeah. I would love to, and happy early birthday, ma'am. And I appreciate you having me yet again. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to next year.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Well, that's been Gina and Chris. Haven't they been awesome? And I got called ma'am lots, which I'm happy about. But they will be back next year because, they've said it's on air. It's recorded. They can't get out of this. It's a verbal contract. It's legally binding. Anyway, so that's been Gina and Chris talking about Octagon Hall in Kentucky. If you want to check out all their respective Facebook pages, we'll make sure the links go up on Parasearch. But this has been me, Penny G. Morgan, on Haunted Histories for you. I'll be talking to the guys from Simply Ghost Nights next week. So do tune in even to listen to me talking to Rosie and Stuart. But until then, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.